This is the third and final part in my analysis for dark aspects of Earthbound. Each episode so far has centered on a different way the game explores mature themes. Violence and villainy, death and demons. Now, I'm going to briefly discuss a few examples of sexual themes before wrapping up this series with the amalgamation of all three topics, the evocative, evil, and erotic inspiration behind Gigas. Part 3. Suggestive and sensual. When it comes to overall differences between the English localization of Earthbound and the original Japanese version, Mother 2, the most well-known change is that of Ness when he's exploring Magicant. In Western releases, he wears pajamas, but in Mother 2, he's completely nude. Why the cover-up censorship? Well, it can very simply be chalked up to cultural differences. This isn't very shocking in Japan, where nudity is accepted in family-friendly media, as it's commonly used to portray and is associated with purity. As Magicant is a personal journey, a world created inside Ness's mind he must conquer to unlock his greatest potential, it makes sense he's fully exposed both figuratively and literally. With that said, in Mother 2, his nakedness is still used once for comedic effect. One of the female NPCs calls him a pervert, a line which was of course changed for Earthbound, since his sprite's been changed from a birthday suit to jammies. Funnily enough, the official Earthbound strategy guide that was initially packaged with the game still has him talking to his family au naturel, suggesting this pajama censorship happened further along in development. On the topic of nudity but putting our backpack back on, let's head outside of our head and over to Tucson. At the end of Earthbound, Ness can visit the mother of Venus, that famous singer who performed in Fourside for some very overenthused fans. Her mom will explain that a book of photographs featuring her daughter is coming out soon, so she hopes Venus will keep her clothes on for it. In Mother 2, however, it's not just a worry. Her mom explicitly states that apparently they're going to publish a photo book of her, in the nude. That's hard to top, Allah, but one of my favorite adult jokes in the game is an easily missable line, given by the Hint Man when visiting Summers for the first time. He'll point Ness and company in the right direction by telling them, quote, "Try placing a call to the strip. Oops, sorry, I mean the Stoic Club," unquote. This blatant reference to strip clubs left in both Earthbound Beginnings and Earthbound was always really surprising to me. This line is essentially the same in Japanese, but it was revised in re-releases where the word isn't quite finished though still implied. What's really funny though is that instead of oops, he stops himself with another linguistic filler, so now he doesn't outright say strip, but this verbal trickery sounds really close to stripper, so it was a great way to save the joke without removing it. You'd be surprised at how many more risque references can be found in the game's script. There's so many they could honestly fill out the rest of this video, but I'm going to stop there as I think I got the point across and there's still a lot to cover with Gigas. So if you are interested in the rest of the crude and lewd humor this game slips past the radar, I will be reserving it all for a separate video as a sort of dark aspects spin-off. So please look out for that in the future. But for now, in the present, the past calls. So let's not keep Gigas waiting. Part 4. Evocative, evil, and erotic. Gigas. With everything I've looked at so far, it's obvious the game has pushed boundaries in many different ways, thoroughly tackling these adult topics and more. Earthbound is a mature game that appears innocuous. It manages to be accessible to anyone of any age while harboring many complex and intense undertones. Gigas is the embodiment of evil, but also of that sentiment. He's a fearful final encounter as is, made even more disturbing when factoring in the deeper connotations. Throughout Earthbound, Gigas is mentioned by name only. His evil influence, helped spread by means of the Mani Mani statue, is what causes the animals and people of the game world to become hostile. He attacks indirectly from an unspecified time in the past, which is where the Chosen Four must now go. However, like I mentioned in the first video, the kids must have their brain programs, or spirits, transferred into the shells of robots, so that their bodies won't be demolished in the process of time travel. Threed was a pretty unique location in that during the zombie invasion, the party could not leave until the threat was resolved. It's the same case here, but on another level, because once the phase distorter is entered, it's truly a point of no return. In other words, Ness and company cannot go back to the present unless Gigas is defeated, and even then, it's not guaranteed. The entire scene is chilling, with even Dr. Andonut struggling to relay this information. But things become truly bleak when first stepping out into the cave of the past. Shuffling around as mechanical husks through desolate caverns, to the sound of a foreboding background track at arms with the strongest enemies of the game is a perfectly haunting build-up to Gigas' lair. Everything seems so cold and lifeless here, which makes it all the more surprising when the palette of grays is suddenly overwhelmed with these fleshy colors, as the party walks across what seems like organic, pulsating tubes. They all lead to the Devil's Machine, an indeterminate instrument housing Gigas in his now unruly state of being. According to Pokey, Gigas can no longer think rationally, and he isn't even aware of what he's doing anymore. It seems that along with Gigas' mind, his body has destroyed itself too, distorting immensely from his original appearance in Earthbound Beginnings into this. It's when the Devil's Machine, interestingly displaying the face of Ness, or perhaps Ninten, is turned off that all hell breaks loose. Gigas' incomprehensible form encompasses the entirety of the screen. It terrifies even Pokey, describing what he's unleashed as a bizarre dimension. During the fight, Gigas will begin spouting what seems like nonsense. He'll repeat Ness's name again and again and again. "I feel good," he'll say immediately after telling you about how sad he is. It's contradictory, it's frenetic, and like Itoi when he wrote these lines, they never fail to genuinely send a chill down my spine. But is it really all just unintelligible? Gigas' mind did derail, but is there a greater meaning behind what he's saying? Yes, absolutely, and thankfully, while there has been a lot of misinformation on the topic spreading across the internet in the past, Itoi's inspiration and intention for Gigas is well documented. It's a pretty well-known story in the fandom, but once when Itoi was a child, he accidentally walked into the wrong showing of a movie theater. He happened to witness a scene from the end of Kempei to Barabara Shibijin, translating into something like the military policeman and the dismembered beauty, where a woman is strangled to death by her fiancé while making love to him. In the words of Itoi, this combination of atrocity and eroticism side by side greatly disturbed him. He was so distraught he hardly spoke for the rest of that night. It even worried his parents. So when writing the lines for this harrowing final encounter, Itoi pulled from that personal trauma, because he wanted players to experience that same twisted, confusing mix of pleasure and pain he was exposed to at a young age. That was always the incident to explain where the concept of Gigas came from, but it actually is not the only one. According to Mato's Legends of Localization book on Earthbound, Itoi recalls witnessing a traffic accident firsthand a long time ago. He saw a young woman lying on the ground, but instead of saying, "I can't breathe" or "help," she just cried out, "It hurts." While none of Gigas' spoken lines are direct quotes from the film that traumatized him, Itoi did take "It hurts" from this memory. Adding to the overall distress, he wanted players to feel reluctance in attacking Gigas, even though he's the enemy. Itoi goes on to explain that the line, "It's not right, not right, not right," means what you're doing isn't right and what I'm doing isn't right. To make something truly upsetting, Itoi had to dig, like an average strength mole, into the darkest depths of his mind. It's clear a lot of thought was put into what Gigas says and how he says it, confirmed doubly by the intimate writing process that ensured these intense emotions hit their mark. What do I mean? Well, at the time Mother 2's script was written, Itoi didn't know how to use computers, so he'd state all the text he wanted typed out loud. For Gigas' dialogue, with just him and his typist in the room, Itoi would speak one character at a time, even every ... A slow process for sure, but having an extra pair of hands meant Itoi could focus entirely on thinking, and it allowed him to gauge his coworkers' reaction to what was just typed out. If there was an effective piece of dialogue, the typist's expression would clearly change. So Itoi knew he had a really good line when they would turn to him and say, "Mr. Itoi," while on the verge of tears. That type of dedication is what makes Earthbound stand out, and created a finale unlike anything else you can experience in gaming. It shouldn't be too much of a surprise to learn then, especially when considering the previous game, that the method to defeating Gigas once and for all is unconventional and innovative. After Poki's final threat, it seems appropriate for the player to continue launching their most powerful attacks. But after exhausting all Psy, bottle rockets, bazookas, and bombs, it starts to become hopeless when all that's left is hand to cosmic horror combat. It is in this very moment of desperation that Itoi wanted players to realize they've grown stronger than what's displayed on their status screen. Money, experience points, weapons, it's all irrelevant now, because the only way to escape this nightmare is by praying. That low-key, random effect in battle ability you probably used once and forgot about. Praying during this fight allows Paula's pleas for help to be heard, subconsciously motivating characters we've met throughout the journey to pray for the children's safety too. As more and more prayers are cast, Gigas is weakened, but things seem dismal when eventually Paula's call is absorbed by the darkness. At this point, it's very likely the player, the person holding the controller, is also praying so that they'll win, which is what ultimately deals the final blow. Because the game's been storing your real name, back when it broke the fourth wall by asking, for this very purpose. It's you who will be credited for dissolving Gigas into static, until he dissipates into nothingness. As this is happening, Poki, rather unfazed, mentions sneaking off into another era to think about his next plan. The game ends then with Poki sending a letter to Ness, challenging the hero to come and find him, but nobody seems to know where it is he's gone off to. It's a cliffhanger that was left unresolved for a little over a decade, which is coincidentally when Poki's punishment in Earthbound is supposed to be over. Not that he deserves any kind of dessert for his abysmal actions in the next game, which we'll get to. But with that, I want to end things here by saying I have a lot to thank for Earthbound. Gigas and the crazy conspiracy theories surrounding him inspired me to create and upload my first ever analytical video on April 10th, 2014. It started performing better than anything I had ever put out on YouTube, so about a year later in March of 2015, I decided to really pursue this, and I've been uploading content regularly ever since. Like every Nintendo kid, I knew about Ness and Lucas from Super Smash Bros. But seeing Gigas at the top of every most disturbing boss battles list on the internet was the real reason I finally decided to give the game a try. Earthbound is so much more than its dark aspects, but it is because of those dark aspects that I found my niche here. You don't have to worry about it taking 10 years for me to make dark aspects of Mother 3, but I will say it is going to be a big project. I'm seriously expecting it to be split into 4 parts. Until then, thank you all for watching. To be continued.